Hi, this is Kyle Schwarber, and welcome to the Phillies Show.
Hi, everybody. Ruben Amaro Jr., Jim Salisbury, Todd Zalecki, brought to you by the Foul Territory Network. It's Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. It's election day. We're not going to talk about the election today, though. We're gonna talk some ball. It's been a while since we talked some ball with you guys. How are you guys doing? You guys doing good?
Doing good, man.
Doing great.
Jim
Todd,
gave us the thumbs up.
Excited. It's GM meetings time, man. It's when the juices start to flow.
This is where Dave Dombrowski is going to get together with Scott Boras and go, what's it going to take to get us Juan Soto?
Todd, I have a lot of GM meeting stories, many. But I'll never forget the year they were in Tucson, and the Phillies had some money to spend, and they were going to make, it was well known, they were going to make a big play for Jim Thome. And it was just one of those years when not a lot of teams were in a position to spend big, but the Phillies had been budgeting and they were ready to spend big. And they were going to go after Thome, and others. So they had some money in their pocket. And a Japanese writer in the lobby went up to Ed Wade at the GM meetings and introduced himself and said, "You're from the Phillies, the team with all the money."
That was in like 2002 or something like that.
2002, right? Yeah.
It was a long time ago. I remember it well. It was in Tucson. And so the bidding period opened while we were at the GM meetings, and you guys faxed your initial offer to Jim Thome at 12:01 Eastern, which I think was like 9:01 Eastern out there. And I remember writing about it and running around and trying to talk to you guys. And it was an exciting GM meetings.
That's how I learned my aggressiveness, through Ed Wade.
The man with all the money.
The man with all the money.
Well, I mean, really, as promised, I mean, the whole deal was at some point when we could create revenue, which was with the new ballpark, and people didn't believe this. Oh, they'll never spend. Well, we'll spend if we have the revenue to spend.
Yep.
And we were about ready to ramp up to go to the new ballpark, and we knew that we would have some revenue to spend, and we spent before we had it.
I'll never forget. I used to have a lot of conversations with Dave Montgomery about payroll, on and off the record, for stories I was writing over the years covering the team. And he used to tell me, when we're in that ballpark, I promise we will have a payroll commensurate with our market size.
Boom.
And he kept his word.
Well, I mean, listen, the one mistake that Bill Giles made was saying that we're not a big market. Well, we weren't big market as far as revenue. Right. We were obviously a big market because it was Philadelphia. It's one of the biggest cities and I think his words were sort of misinterpreted, because we really didn't have the type of revenue that a lot of other truly large market teams had, because we couldn't generate it with our stadium and on our contracts. And so when I say contracts, like, our stadium is basically owned by Philadelphia, and we were sort of leasees, us and the Eagles. And so it made it difficult to create the sort of revenue that was necessary to be commensurate with the market size, until we actually had our own ballpark and could do it.
Well, since the Thome signing, really the Phillies have been top 5, top 10 in payroll, other than those lean years of like 2016 to 2019-ish before they signed Harper and got JT. So they've been top 10, top 5. They're top 5 this year. They're going to be top 5 next year. And that kind of leads us to Juan Soto. And we've talked about Juan Soto a lot on the show already. Ruben, you said if the Yankees don't re-sign Juan Soto, Brian Cashman should be fired. Jim, you said if the Phillies sign Juan Soto, you will eat your shoe. Correct? Do I remember this? Do I remember this correctly?
Correctly.
I not only said that, I'm fully prepared to do it.
Oh, that's a nice shoe you got.
That's looks like a blueberry type tasting shoe.
I'm fully prepared.
So if you guys sitting here today, There's a lot of talk about probabilities, of course, right? Again, not talking election, but there's a lot of probabilities, who's going to win, who's going to lose. If you had to put a probability on Juan Soto signing the Phillies as of today, what percentage would you give it, Ruben?
17%.
17%. Why 17%?
I just pulled that number. It's
Okay.
lower than a quarter,
All right.
lower than a half, higher than a zero. I think 17% is probably my number. Now, it doesn't mean that it won't be pursued or discussed.
Correct.
Either internally or externally with Mr. Boris. But you can be sure that Mr. Boris will utilize the biggest markets to use as a stalking horse to try to move the number and move the needle. So you can be sure that even if the Phillies aren't totally in, or the Chicago Cubs, or the Dodgers, or whomever, those big money, big markets, Mr. Boris will indeed make it sound like everyone's involved.
Everyone's involved. Jim, what about you? What number are you putting on it, probability-wise?
What did Ruben put on at 17?
17.
I'll go 8.5, half of that.
Okay. I like it. Okay. I was going to say like 10%, maybe even lower than that. I'll say 9. I'll say 9% chance they go and they get Juan Soto. It's really hard to envision, isn't it? Knowing where
it is. I think here's the thing. I think ultimately the way Scott Boras operates, and he should, the way he operates is that he is going to set a market somehow, some way with this player. Obviously, the total number of dollars at $700 million, I guess, with Shohei Ohtani, he may not get to that number, but in some way, either with the length of the contract or the AAV, average annual value of the contract, he will do what he can, or the actual value of the contract, like today's number on average. He's going to set a precedent with this player because of the many factors involved. One of the best hitters of all time, and that's how he's going to market him. Youngest hitter of all time, and a world champion player as well, who's played in all the markets now. Washington, New York, San Diego. He's got all markets covered. Whether it's a small one or a medium one or a large one, he can handle them all.
Yeah.
Right.
Agree. He waited, for A-Rod to hit the market, and that was going to move the bar. I mean, Kevin Brown hit the market. He was a Boris guy. I remember writing a story at the Nashville winter meetings one year that, baseball has its first $100 million man, and that was Kevin Brown. And now, wow. And then, next was A-Rod for Scott Boras, and then obviously Bryce Harper. And now his next, celestial supernova is.
What's he gonna call this guy?
Juan Soto. Yeah.
What is he gonna call him?
I agree with you. He's gonna sell that this guy has won a World Series, succeeded in New York on the biggest stage. He's gonna sell the 26 years old. And when I say I only give the Phillies an 8.5% chance of signing him, that's not because I don't expect them to make the call, to have the meeting, to prepare a proposal. They're going to be in on all the big name free agents, but push comes to shove. I just don't think their payroll structure is where it needs to be to take on another huge ticket like a Trey Turner and a Bryce Harper. He'd look great in a Phillies uniform. He'd certainly help him, but he'd help all 30 teams. But in the end, to me, this looks like he's going to the highest bidder. And I see Yankees, Mets, Giants in it. And maybe the Mets just holding that last trump card to say, okay, gotcha.
So, Juan Soto, after Game 5 of the World Series, Jim, he talked about, do you want to stay in New York? Do you want to stay a Yankee? And he said, we are going to be available to every team. I feel like every team has the same opportunity. I don't want to say anybody has the advantage because at the end of the day, we're going to look at what we have and how much they want me. I don't know all the teams that are after me, but I'm definitely open to listen. I don't have any doors closed. I'm available to all 30 teams. That sounds like a guy who's, if it's the Padres or a sleeper team or the Yankees or the Mets, if it's the numbers 500 or 600 or whatever it ends up being, he's going to take the highest number, the highest AAV or the highest overall value of the deal and go to that place. And that's why I think the Phillies are going to be, that's why, under 10% chance because, right.
Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
No, I was going to say, so let's consider the Phillies payroll situation right now. And I want to bear with me, guys, but I want to break this down for luxury tax purposes. There's a Fangraphs, COTS contracts. They all break down. They all do future projections. And COTS, for instance, projects the Phillies 2025 payroll to be $262 million. That's without re-signing Jeff Hoffman. That's without re-signing Carlos Estevez. That's without acquiring any player via trade or free agency that's making any little bit of money. That would already put him over the second luxury tax threshold. The final number of, is figured out a little bit differently. There's like some player benefits, right? It's the total overall 40-man roster. So the number is actually a bit higher than that, but just to keep it simple, it's 262. Okay. So if the Phillies would say they would get incredibly lucky and they would sign Juan Soto to a contract where the average annual value is $41 million. So it beats Aaron Judge's $40 million. Okay. That would push the Phillies payroll to $303.4 million. They would be paying $43.76 million in tax penalties because they would be over the fourth luxury tax threshold. It would push their payroll to just under $350 million. That's without the extra benefits that actually adds on to that. And they would also have their top pick in the draft fall 10 spots. So now you start thinking, well, he's going to get more. Don't you guys think he's going to get more than 41 million AAV? I think that's low. I think that's low. Great. So say he gets, $50 million a year, it's going to push the payroll to 336 million. They're going to pay almost $80 million in tax penalties. And it's going to bring their overall payment to more than $415 million.
And that's without addressing the bullpen?
That's without addressing the bullpen. That's without addressing anybody else. Austin Hayes is going to come off probably. I'm thinking he might be non-tendered. So there's some moves. But this is just a big picture, generally speaking. If you would just sign, a Juan Soto. Well, let me say that last number I gave you, that would be if they did sign a relief pitcher or two. So that's including everybody into that picture would be 400, over $400 million. So that's a big number. That's a big number. And now, so let me add this real quick.
It's a very unrealistic number, and it gives people a perspective on what the reality of it is. Now, Can you trade Castellanos and Schwarber and get this guy? Can you trade, Aaron Nola and get this guy? Can you, rob Peter to pay Paul? Yes, but you're weakening your team. And so he's a great player, and I'd love to have him, and everybody would, but there's got to be a reality in there somewhere. And I know the ownership group has a bunch of new investors. That does not mean that they're so flush that they can go to those levels, and that's sort of the reality. And I think people need to understand that. It would be great to have the player, but I have a totally different take on this. Again, you guys have your take as to why. My take is that there's no way in hell that the New York Yankees, if they truly want to be the New York Yankees, are going to allow this player to walk. And I think ultimately, even if the Mets and Cohen comes in at a number that's stupid, I do believe that the Yankees will go ahead and be a little stupider, because I think, or more stupid. And sure. Just because it's just too difficult to replace this guy. Imagine where the Yankees would have been had they not had Juan Soto this year.
Right.
They really probably would not have been a World Series contender, I don't think. And so they have to sort of put themselves in a position to do that. And they have the revenues to be able to match any team, including the Mets.
We'll be right back.
I love a great deal, but I'm not going to run sprints in the outfield just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. With Mint Mobile, it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan. Purchase and activation is super easy too.
To get started, go to mintmobile.com/territory. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/territory. That's mintmobile.com/territory. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/territory.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on their first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Ruben, you mentioned the boost in owner or the new owners. They added 3 new members to the ownership group, and I had the opportunity to talk to John Middleton on Friday about it. And he said they basically brought them in because there's some COVID-19 pandemic debt that they're trying to pay down. There's some operating losses they want to take care of. They're trying to invest in this new complex down in Clearwater, a really like reimagined, bigger, better complex. Citizens Bank Park upgrades, capital investments in the future. And I said, well, the one thing that Phillies fans are going to kind of think or hope for is that these 3 new investors is going to make the payroll maybe a little bit crazier than it already is. And John said, it's hard to go much crazier with the payroll. So that's a little peek into that. And I think also, he's kind of he kind of said the payrolls, it's still a top 5 payroll, but it doesn't sound like they can, unless they would do something dramatic, be able to
I can see
done.
them. I mean, honestly, Todd, I can see them as they have in the past. I mean, listen, this is it is enough money to field a team that should be a contending team.
Right.
And the ownership group is by no means at fault for any, things that have happened. It's really about, managing, all of this money and the payroll, et cetera. So it's, the ownership group, they've done their part. There's no question about it. But there's also a limit to everything. And, if you're a human being, and I know that, John Middleton, he is as big a fan as there is, but he's also a businessman. And at some point, you have to be able to have some level of fiduciary awareness and responsibility. And that's got to be part of the equation as well.
So what are the scenarios in which the Phillies hit that 8.5% mark, Jim, or 10% mark for me, 17% mark for Ruben? I think one of them is John Middleton just goes, screw it. Let's just do it. Damn the torpedoes. I'm going to bank, mortgage the future of the Phillies and just sign them, right? That's one of them. The second one is Ruben, you mentioned, which is maybe John goes, all right, we'll take a run at him, but you have to clear some serious payroll. Now you mentioned Castellanos. Could you trade Castellanos and dump the $40 million that he's owed over the next years? I don't know that you could do that. Maybe you could. You can't trade Taijuan Walker. Nobody's taking that contract. So now you're getting into Kyle Schwarber in the last year of his deal, JT Realmuto, if Alvarado, Strahm, Christopher Sanchez are all signed through next season and beyond at reasonable numbers. You could trade ARB eligible players like Alec Boehm, Bryson Stott, Ranger Suarez, Brandon Marsh. Could any of those? Do you see a scenario where Dave Dombrowski go, all right, yeah, I want Juan Soto. I'm gonna, like you said, robbing Peter to pay Paul. How realistic is that? And do you weaken you would weaken yourself in other spots?
Yeah, I think, I think it would be difficult to move Castellanos. I'm not sure you'd find a taker. I mean, they tried last winter. There was no taker. And, he proved to be pretty valuable this year. He had that really good stretch. I mean, you start trading from your core and you're kind of eating away at your muscle, where, one guy, can't be the whole show. I mean, the reason I gave it 8.5% is I would put nothing past John Middleton. And I would even extend that to Dave Dombrowski. I would put nothing past Dave Dombrowski. I think he is a big game hunter throughout his career. That said, I think they're kind of maxed out on big game on this roster, and I just don't feel it, and I don't see it, and I think Dave tipped his hand when he said we have a lot of star players already. And I think John has kind of tamped down expectations by saying, the payroll can't get much crazier or whatever he told you, Todd.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, if you just look at it, it just doesn't, it's not the year for this team to make that big $500 million commitment or whatever it's going to cost. Maybe another year, a couple years ago or a few years down the road. But at this point, it just doesn't feel like it's the right fit. But I'm sure they'll be in it, like I said, and they'll gauge what it takes. And if he looks him in the eye and says, I really want to be a Philly, I really want to play with Bryce Harper, I really want to play in Citizens Bank and feel it shake, I really want to bring a World Series I want to really bring John Middleton's trophy back. Then I think at that point you have to get on your airplane and go have a big old board meeting and say, he really wants to be here. What do we do to make it happen? But I'm not sure that he's going to look you in the eye and say that. I think he's going to have other options. And I just don't feel it.
So if you wanted to be super creative and, the conspiracy theorists, good time for it, right? During the election day. If you really want to go crazy and start thinking of ways to make this happen, yeah, of course. You can couple Aiden Miller and you can throw in Crawford and you can throw in Painter and you can send that team along with Castellanos or Schwarber or Taiwan Walker or a couple of those guys.
Mm-hmm.
But is that really what you want to do? Is that strengthening your team overall? I mean, so there's ways to do it. I just don't think it's the right thing for the Phillies to do it that way. And I just don't think it's a realistic way to go about it. But if you wanted to go crazy and truly go crazy and your white whale was Juan Soto, there's ways to do it. I just don't think, one, that Dave Dombrowski would want to do that and weaken his ball club, short term and long term. And I don't think John Middleton would want to do that either.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think John or Dave want any part of trading Painter. I mean, maybe they would. I could see them trading one of the guys individually, maybe to upgrade at a certain position, like Miller or Crawford or whatever. I don't know if they would trade Painter. Dave's talking about him being in the rotation midseason, but it's something. But yeah, to package all those guys to get rid of some other big salary, then you've weakened yourself for the future, and now you've got no reinforcements coming in. You're kind of putting yourself in a bad spot. And then you have to throw more money. Now you have to throw more money into it if something goes wrong, because you don't have a shortstop or a number 5 starter, because you don't have Painter anymore, and Abel and McGarry and some of these other guys are struggling. So you kind of box yourself in.
I mean, even if you want to get more creative, you want to trade Turner in this deal and replace that guy. Oh, is that a possibility? Hey, you never know. Sounds crazy. But, I mean, there's ways to do these sort of things. I just don't know. I just don't know if that's the route that they would want to take.
Yeah.
Do you think you're throwing out these creative ideas. I mean, Trey Turner with 9 years left. Do you think somebody takes that?
Somebody who does not get who is in the Juan Soto running. Do the Giants, who have trouble signing people, do they get a Trey Turner? Does Buster Posey think that Trey Turner can really turn that type of player can turn their organization around? Again, I'm just throwing stuff out there and seeing if it sticks. But, if Juan Soto becomes the guy and you can, move a contract to bring on a contract, albeit a bigger one, because it's going to be a lot bigger than $300 million more dollars. I mean, there's crazier ways to go about it. And hey, I mean, who's to say these things won't happen? It's not an impossibility, but I think the probability is pretty low.
This deal, do you agree that I feel like this deal could be like twice as much as Bryce Harper?
It could be.
I think it will. I think it could be, which is a crazy thing. It's a crazy notion.
So
It's a crazy notion.
how many years can you play in that deep end when the deep end keeps getting deeper?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that number. So like Ohtani's what, 700 million, but it's a lot of it's deferred. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
he's going to, and the actual real dollars is what, like 450 million or present day value. So
Present
he's
day
gonna
value is between 450 and 5.
Yeah. And like I said, Judge right now behind Ohtani has the second highest AAV for any position player at 40 million. So he's going to rocket. I feel like he's going to rocket past that because you're going to
go north. He's going to go north of that, even if it's $1.
Right.
Even if it's so that Scott Boras can say he signed the most lucrative, contract in some way, shape, or form. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, like, I guess, could Dave Dombrowski try to like sweet talk John and say, hey, John, by the way, some of these guys are coming off the books the next few years. You're not going to have Schwarber after next season. You might not have Real Muto. So why don't we just eat it for 1 year, pay a massive penalty, and some of these guys are going to fall by the wayside. We'll just let Schwarber walk away. Maybe we can find a replacement level catcher to replace JT. Maybe pair this guy with Rafael Marchand. Trying to think who else is coming. A couple of years. Suarez is a free agent. Let him go because we think Painter and maybe a couple of these prospects are going to pan out. Could you go into his office and make a pitch like that? I mean, I'm just thinking about long shot options.
Yeah, I mean, you could, Todd. I mean, it depends on how important you think Soto becomes, and what he can bring to the table. It could be a pitch. I mean, it's not unrealistic. Yeah. It's not a total, non-starter, but who knows?
Right. I can only make that pitch, if I'm the GM, going to John and say, if Juan Soto looks me in the eye and says, I'm not talking to anybody else, here's my number, I want to be a Philly, you got 48 hours. That's the only way that I think the Phillies would have that conversation and attempt to do the creative maneuvering that it would take to make this happen.
And you would almost also be able to say, okay, this is the number. It's going to be $526 million.
Mm-hmm.
And are you willing to pay it? Are you willing to take John Middleton? And are you willing to take it, Juan Soto? And then we try to do all the machinations that you would want to make to have it happen. Then that could be a possibility. But again, not all that realistic.
Yeah, well, Jim, you mentioned, you want Juan Soto looking in the eye and say, I want to be a Philadelphia Philly. Ruben, you had a similar situation with Cliff Lee in the winter of 2010. He came to you guys and said, I want to come back to Philadelphia. I don't want to go to the Yankees. I don't want to stay in Texas. And so you pull out the heavy machinery, didn't you? Didn't you have talked to Pat Gillick, and didn't Pat go to David Montgomery? And then I remember Scott Profrock, your assistant GM at the time, wrote a memo to David Montgomery saying, explaining why this would mean everything to Philadelphia and all this stuff. So you guys kind of sweet talk David into going over, but the money was different then, I guess.
I think you only added another $5 million though. This is a lot different.
Yeah. Right. No, I know.
Yeah, it was obviously very different, but yeah, I mean, anytime you have a player who really wants to come there and you can trust him that he does, that makes a huge difference.
Right.
That said, I mean, you heard it right from the horse's mouth. He's open to all 30 teams, and right. nobody has the break. Nobody's got the inside track. And it just sounds like it's going to be one of those. The team that has the inside track is a team that's come up with the most glue.
That's right. And again, Dave Dombrowski said last month, I don't think we need to have more star players. And I'll obviously, a lot of times GMs will say stuff, president of baseball operations will say stuff because they want to tip their hand. But it doesn't sound like somebody who's really going for it, or feels like he needs to drop $500 on somebody to push him over the top. You know what I mean? $500 million. So people are going to think we're a bunch of Debbie Downers today because we're kind of dumping on the chances of Juan Soto. Believe me, I would love to see the Phillies sign Juan Soto. I think it would be tremendous fun.
Me too. It's not my money.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly. We're just saying, I think if I'm reading everything correctly, that we don't think there's a lot of reasons why it's less likely to happen than will happen. The Phillies will pursue him. They're going to talk to Scott. Scott's going to be on the phone with Dave. He's going to be on the phone with John. He's going to try to get them going, right, guys? And he's going to try to, keep the Phillies in it as long as humanly possible, no matter what Dave or John might say publicly. You're going to see little reports until Juan signs that the Phillies are still don't count out the Phillies. They're lurking.
Submarining.
Submarining. That was one of Scott's. That was my first winter meetings of 2003 in New Orleans. Kevin Millwood was a free agent. There was no buzz about him at all at the winter meetings. And that's when Scott said it's the ultimate submarine race. And then a few months later, he accepted salary arbitration, right? Or shortly thereafter, he accepted a salary arbitration because he got into good offers. So anyway, all right. Well, I think we banged out Juan Soto pretty good.
So when's the press conference?
Exactly. Well, we missed the World Series prediction. We misfired on the NLDS prediction. So let's maybe prepare for the one. Yeah, maybe we'll miss on this. But we'll be back later this week. If you guys have any questions for us, drop them on Twitter or X, Instagram. Put them in the comments on YouTube. We're going to get into a lot more hot stove stuff. Free agents, maybe the Phillies should pursue. Trade targets, maybe that the Phillies should pursue. And, we'll be doing that all winter. So, guys, we'll see you later.
Smell you later, boys.
Smell you, Jim.
The Philly Show is brought to you by the Foul Territory Network. Subscribe to The Philly Show on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like us, give us a review. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, and Threads. Find Ruben's analysis before, during, and after Phillies games on NBC Sports Philadelphia, on the Sports Radio 94 WIP Morning Show, and MLB Network. Find Jim at allphly.com. Find me at MLB.com, the Phillies Beat newsletter, and MLB Network.